What's going on, guys? Welcome to the IslesHouse. Today we're going to do a complete rundown of Lou Lamoriello's tenure with the Islanders, giving our opinions and rankings along the way. This one's going to be a roller coaster. Jack, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, I've been looking forward to this one for a long time. So to kick us off, we're going to go right back when we all began this journey, which was on May 22nd, 2018. Lou Lamoriello was hired by the New York Islanders as their president of hockey operations. A couple weeks later, Lamoriello went on to fire both Doug Waite and Garth Snow, who was general manager at the time. And 2 weeks later, Lou Lamoriello on June 21st, 2018, hired Barry Trotz as the head coach. So right away, Lou came in as president. He allowed Snow to stay around for the draft. And from there, it became the Lou and Barry show. And as we all know, I think they sat down with John Tavares before he left for Toronto. Wasn't enough to convince him, but the offseason had to go on. So
I'm not bleeping that, by the way.
Yeah, good riddance.
I
This
guess
Yeah.
I guess we'll keep it for this one.
No, we need the
Um,
context.
yeah. So the offseason started off on a pretty sour note, I think we could all say, but one of the first moves that Lamoriello made as GM was he brought back Matt Martin from the Toronto Maple Leafs. One of those moves where I think every Islander fan was probably happy about it. Little did we know the effect it was about to really have on the team. So following up in free agency, a similar move, one that probably flew under the radar at the time. The Islanders signed goaltender Robin Leonard to a 1 year contract. He, at that point, had a little bit of a disappointing career, and the Islanders gave him a shot, and it ended up working out. So after him, Leo Komarov, Tom Kuhnhackl, Valtteri Filppula, and the re-signing of Thomas Hickey brought the 2018-2019 Islanders team together. As we all know, this team went on to have a great season, and it was more of like they got to the deadline and they had already brought up Devon Tays. Things were going really well, and I think it was more of a let's see, let's wait and see where we're really at here come playoff time. Um, and yeah, they didn't make any moves at the deadline and just went into the playoffs where they swept the Pittsburgh Penguins and then they turned around and got swept by the Carolina Hurricanes. And unfortunately, the Hurricanes will probably be a reoccurring theme in this video. But yeah, year one. What are you guys thinking?
Well, you missed one important thing that was kind of foreshadowing the remainder of Lou's tenure. So you got all the signings except for the Ross Johnston extension. Now, I didn't know until I checked before that this happened in this offseason, but he signed Ross Johnston to a 4 year, $4 million a year extension on July 9th of 2018.
wait. Ross
I thought,
Johnson?
yeah,
Yep. I,
Wait. 4 years, 4 million a year?
yep. No. 4 years, 4 million total. So it was 1 million
Okay,
a
I
year.
was like,
Yep.
yeah, there's no
Yeah,
way.
yeah.
Okay,
Wasn't that
yeah.
bad. Wasn't
Yeah,
that
it was
bad.
still bad, but that would have been horrible.
But it was like that. It's ironic looking back on it now because it's kind of foreshadowing for all of the problems that I think we've all felt with Lou for the 4 years. But
Mhm.
I mean, basically, Jack, what you were saying, like year one, everyone's full of optimism. I think the main thing, at least for me, I don't know how you guys feel about it, but when Lou came in here, it felt like it was the first time that the franchise was going to be actually like a professional organization. This was just kind of chaotic, off the rails. And Lou's going to come in. He's going to put in all of his rules, the no beards, the low jersey numbers, all that. And he was going to make the Islanders into more of a professional team at that point. And remember, we still didn't have an arena at this time. We were still in Brooklyn. We still didn't know what was going on with the
we were still
Coliseum.
splitting, I think, right?
I believe so. But
Yeah, it was. It was. It
like it
was
was
split.
just the beginning of that. Like it was the whole split. But like Lou was at the beginning, he was signaling a redevelopment of the Islanders, where at least I felt more confident that we were going to be treated with a little bit more respect, and
100%.
we would be taken seriously.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
the biggest thing that changed that season, as you said, was really the culture, and not even just Lou, him hiring Trotz. Like there was immediate signs that this team was improving in every way possible. So it was less about the roster that season for his impact, but it was still fantastic.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. It really was the culture that year. I mean, towards the end, as we're going to get into, it kind of went away, but no, it was the first time in a while when he first came in that I genuinely thought, and I think people as a whole around the league, fans from other fan bases thought as well, the Islanders were actually turned into a serious franchise. I mean,
It was,
what,
it was,
20 years before that, it was just a complete joke.
yeah.
It was ridiculous. And I also think if we look at the season right before, so the last year of Doug Waite, they gave up, I think it was 296 goals, which
Hmm.
was
The fact you
the
remember that is
I think
insane.
the
No,
only reason
you're
I remember
right.
that, the only thing I remember that was because I know the first year under Barry, they cut the goals by 100, which was the only team to do that since the first year that Al Arbor was here when they cut it by 100 goals.
Didn't they go from literally the worst defense
Yep.
in the league to the
Yep.
best with pretty much the same roster minus Tavares,
Pretty
Yep.
iconic. I think at Trott's
which is
opening
insane.
presser when he was announced head coach, they asked him, they're like, "What are you going to do about the defense?" And he's like, "I'll fix the defense."
Well,
And
and actually, I was just about to say that, Jack. I still remember this. The very first, it wasn't even a press conference. It was a phone call where they had Barry on and they asked him, like, what are you going to do? This was the worst defensive team, in the league. And he said, fixing the defense is easy. He said, that's the easy part. Scoring is the hard part. The Islanders had that down, which, again, is ironic. But he's like, we had that down. We'll fix the defense. That'll be easy. And I heard that, and I was like, yeah, we'll see about that once they actually take the ice. And
we'll see about that. We were
I'm
still thinking about number 58, Adam Pellick, at that time. Little did we know what was coming.
and just to go through the rest of the list, the other signings, which was bananas to me. So he gave Ryan Pollock, this is Lou, in July of 18, Ryan Pollock a 2-year extension worth $4 million, dollars, and Brock Nelson a 1-year extension worth 4.25 million. I mean,
That's crazy.
like how those have turned out is insane. But I think anyway, what we want to get through here is like that first season. So Lou gets here, he brings in Barry, he makes these signings. The first season comes around, and the Islanders, for the first couple of months, are red hot, and they become one of the best teams in the league. Um, what are we thinking?
Leading leading the division by January.
Yeah. So we're
Yeah,
all like, what? I don't know how you guys were feeling at that exact moment.
it was unbelievable. Just there was
Yeah.
the other underrated part about all of it was that was the season they first played at the Coliseum again, and Tavares came back for that game in late February at the Coliseum. That is the craziest regular season game I've ever been to. And just like the vibes around that team were something else. Like you really thought they had a chance to go all the way. Um, it was just, it felt like so unbelievable that like you didn't even, like it was hard to believe that like we were that good after
Yeah.
watching the previous few years. Like it came out of nowhere, and it just kind of showed us all how important coaching is and culture. It was
Yeah.
just it was incredible.
That was like the Tavares return game. That was classic Coliseum too. I love
Yeah,
UBS, but man, nothing beats the Collie.
There's nothing like
nothing.
it. And
Yeah.
didn't it almost feel like they were playing with house money that year?
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
and I would just say like, so that the crazy part is that's not even the peak of this regime, but right off the bat, like the way some Islander fans talk about Lou today, if you told them that like 8 years ago, they would not believe you. That's how
Yeah.
good it was.
Hmm.
Um, moving forward to the off season of 2019,
Well, hang on,
at the t-
before we do that, Jack, I'm sorry to cut you off, but like the trade deadline of that year,
yeah,
if you guys remember, like the Islanders were cooking in the regular season. They were one of the best teams in the Eastern Conference. The trade deadline comes around, and we're all like, all right, what is Lou going to do now? Like that, we've proven over 50 something games that we're legit. Like, what's Lou going to do? And then he does nothing. It was the famous first stand pat trade deadline.
yeah,
Yeah.
And we had some fans that were annoyed. We had some fans like me that were like, well, it's house money. I don't like, I'm not going to make a huge deal out of it. What did you guys think that first year? Were you anticipating like a big swing that deadline?
Can you remind me who was available?
So,
Because I'm better at remembering like looking out for players. Like
Yeah,
I
it's a
think it
good
was a
point.
year. I think it was a year later where they were linked to Parisi in Minnesota. But
Mhm.
I really think that was the year Pajot ended up getting traded to
yep.
us. Yeah.
So let me just, I'm pulling up the trade deadline tracker from that year. I think the big name that year was Mark Stone. I think that's when he went to Vegas.
Yeah.
Um,
I don't remember the Islanders seriously being in on anyone.
I don't
so
remember being upset either. So
Yeah.
if I don't remember being upset, then I probably wasn't that upset that he didn't do anything that year.
Yep. So the big trade that year. So Mark Stone went to Vegas from Ottawa. You had another hot name was
Hmm.
Marcus Johansson, who went from the Devils to the Bruins that year, and you also had Kevin Fiala
Okay.
going to the Wild. He was swapped for Mikael Granlund at that trade deadline. Derek Brassard was moved, so it wasn't like you didn't have like a blockbuster trade. Kevin Hayes was traded from the Rangers to the Jets,
Yeah,
so it wasn't
we weren't in,
major.
in on that.
Yeah, I know. Like I can speak personally. I wasn't that disappointed because it was
Yeah.
kind of house
Yeah, I
money.
couldn't have been.
And they ended up getting swept in the second round. So I think maybe not buying. I'm not sure they were one player away to begin with. It was kind of crazy how they just got ran out of that series by Carolina. A few bounces go against them in the first few games, and all
Yeah,
of a
because
sudden
it was much closer of a series than you would think.
you're
4-0. I mean,
yeah.
Well,
Except we're not Brind'Amours Moores here. We won't act like we
yeah,
didn't
no,
get
we
swept.
got, yeah, but
Yeah,
the only thing I remember from that run, well, there were two things. It was one, the first round against Pittsburgh, they played at the Coliseum. The second round was all at the Barclays Center, which I thought
yeah,
was
mhm.
stupid.
Yeah,
stupid.
so dumb.
But the first round, I just remember like they swept Pittsburgh, but they didn't really deserve to sweep Pittsburgh. Like they got a lot of lucky bounces. Like everything kind of went their way, and then once they played
Mhm.
Carolina, every single thing like flopped or flipped.
Yeah, everything went against them in that series. Didn't they have a goal called off in one of the games too?
Yeah.
I think it was
Yeah,
game one. Yeah,
Hmm. That
game
was
one they
Nelson,
did.
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah,
like, all right. So it's like the first season is unbelievable. Like
yeah, it is.
the passion is back in the fan base. That was one of the most fun seasons I've watched. They announced at the end of the year that they're going to play at the Coliseum full time the next season. And now it's like, all right, how are we going to build off of this year? And before I give it back to you guys, I will share the quote that I sent in our group chat earlier today from Barry Trotz. This was actually from Locker Cleanout Day. I've thought about this quote probably for the last 6 years, if I'm being completely honest with you, because it still resonates. And I'm searching for it. This is from Arthur Staple. Links. Bear with me. Here we go. So, locker cleanout day after they get swept by the Hurricanes. This was from May 6th, 2019. They asked Barry Trotz, what do you think the Islanders need to address in the offseason? And he goes, quote, a little more pop up front. I think that's probably what we needed the entire season. So
Yeah,
then what happens after that?
yeah. So what happens after that is one of the more famous swing and misses in free agency in Islanders history.
Hmm.
I I really remember just thinking to myself, wow, like the Islanders are really going to get Artemi Panarin. And watching him in Columbus the year before, he was the real deal. Like that was going to be, I was thinking if we got Panarin, I was thinking like we are going to win a Stanley Cup. Like that is actually the complete missing piece. And it felt like it was going to happen one day. And then the next day, he signs with the Rangers for, I believe,
Oh,
less money. And my theory on it is I think Panarin sat down with the Islanders. And instead of, I don't think it was trying to drive up a bid. I think it was more they were saying you're going to have to sacrifice some offense here. You're going to have to develop some sort of two-way game. This is how we play. This is our system, and that's that. And I think Panarin, I don't think Panarin was too interested in that. I mean, he's on the record rejecting being the captain of the Rangers right now. I just don't think he was bought in to that mentality. So he ended up signing with the Rangers. So he went out, he tried to get a scorer, and when that fell through, they ended up re-signing Anders Lee, Jordan Eberle, and Tom Kuhnhackl. And the big UFA signing was none other than Derek Brassard. Also very notable, they let 1 year fan favorite Robin Leonard walk, and they also signed Semyon Varlamov. And I think that was in anticipation of Ilya Sorokin coming over, which happens the following offseason. Um, this year starts, they break a record of consecutive games with points, or was it a winning streak?
I think
Was
it
it?
was. I think it was a point streak.
Yeah, I think it
I,
was. Wasn't it like
I think
16 games?
Yeah, it was unbelievable. They had two straight overtime games where Brock Nelson scores the overtime winner. They start off this season hot, and it was a weird year because COVID came in and interrupted everything. But right before COVID, it was very weird. So they were still hot, and Lou went out and he took the swing that Trotz asked of him. He traded for John Gabriel Pajot at the around the 2020 trade deadline. He traded a first round pick in the 2020 draft and also a second round pick and a conditional third round pick in 2022. So he picks up Pajot. He also goes out. He gets Andy Green to come over from New Jersey. So the Stan Pat era was done for a little bit. And Adam Pellick and Casey Cizikas, who was a very good fourth liner and penalty killer at that time. They both went down with injuries. So right before the league shut down, the Islanders were actually really struggling. They found themselves outside the playoff
Yeah.
picture. Still were, I think, at least 10 games over 500. Just hard to believe that they were outside then, and thinking about that now, they would have been running away in the playoff race this season. But yeah, so the season goes on pause, as you guys all know. They go to the bubble, and in the bubble, some more magic happens. Everybody's healthy, and the Islanders just go in there and just are murdering everybody. They go through the Panthers extremely fast. They go through the Capitals easily, I think in 5 games. Then they go to a game 7 against Philadelphia.
Yeah,
I
and
think
they were winning that series 3-1, and then
yeah,
Yep.
they blew it.
is it, I think, did the Flyers win all those games in overtime?
I don't
All
remember that. I do remember that they blew the 3-1
Yeah,
though.
that one
I,
I do. I know there was a game. I think it was when they were up 3-1. They had a two-goal. No, sorry, they were down by two in the third period, and they ended up tying the game to force overtime. And then I think it was like Travis Sanheim, or it was one of the Flyers defensemen, I
yeah,
think, that won it in overtime.
it was just it was a weird series and one that I thought the Islanders kind of dominated, and it was crazy that it went to a game 7. But by the time it got there, they actually rolled out Thomas Greiss, and they had a just that was a great effort by them. They went right past Philly, and then they ran into Tampa. And this is the Lightning were the President's Trophy winners the year before that lost to the first round. This team was not going to be beat by anybody that season. The Islanders did take them to 6 games, fell short, but once again, year 1, second round exit. Now we're at year 2. We're buying at the deadline. We're losing in game 6 to the Stanley Cup champions in the Eastern Conference Finals. Like, there's still not much. There's really nothing to complain about. Like, this is a really good team. Devontae's came on. And we'll get to him, but he really came on that season and the season before. Like, there was youth, there were veterans, everybody was just humming, and yeah, it was a good time to be an Islander fan.
I should have asked you guys before, and we should probably do this like when we end each season. Like, what was the vibe check for Lou after that first season? If we have to give him a grade, including the
He
off season
After the 18-19
after
season,
18-19. Like, how we all feeling at this point?
I give him
18,
at least an A.
I think an A.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm with you on that one. I think he starts at an A.
Hmm.
I think he maintains the A in year two.
And there was one, and first
Definitely.
of all, I
Yeah.
agree, totally agree. I love the
Yeah.
trades they did at the deadline. The one other
Hmm.
thing that you missed, remember, Anders Lee tore his MCL, and he missed the entire bubble.
Was
Next, no, no, next,
Yeah,
that's
that
Was
was
next season.
2021.
Are you
That's
was that
next.
was
Yeah,
that
yeah,
21?
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
I'm getting
That's
them
next
mixed up. All
season.
right, scratch that then. All right. Anyway, he's still at an A, still at an A in the bubble. And by the way, anyone who says that the bubble run is fraudulent, I have such a huge problem with that.
Yeah.
Like that was everyone was in
Agreed.
the same situation. The Islanders took advantage of it. Other teams like the Capitals didn't want to be there.
Hmm.
Sucks to be them.
And the
Uh,
Islanders did it 2 years in a row.
yeah,
Same, same with Tampa.
It
exactly.
stings. It does always sting that that happened in the bubble and that it didn't happen at the Coliseum. Like that was
Yeah.
that did kill me at the time. Um, but yeah, A's all around. We're all feeling good. And then, so since COVID happened, we had a very tough salary cap to manage, and decisions had to be made. So this is where things take a little bit of a turn, I would say, for the first time. Is there anything else you guys want to get onto in the 2020 season? Yeah, everyone's on the same page there.
This was
So
Yeah.
where this is where the downfall began. I'm up like A plus, love Lou, and Lou we trust, and then this
Hmm.
offseason happens.
this
Yeah.
offseason happens, and it starts with no first round draft pick in 2020 because that was traded for JG Pajot. And Ilya Sorokin came over from Russia on a 1 year contract. Now, getting Ilya over from Russia, that was a good accomplishment from Lou. I'm
Yeah,
not
for sure.
sure other GMs get him to come over. So there's a few things, hiring Trotz, getting Sorokin to come over. Like there's little things here that he gets done that are very important. However, so this is one of his worst, but we're going to talk about it. So the Islanders trade Devon Tays and they acquire Colorado's second round selections in 2021 and 2022. Now, I remember getting this notification walking to class while I was in college. And I remember immediately thinking, what the fuck are we doing? Why would we ever trade Devon Tays? Like, this is insane. And my one of my good friends is like was really always paying attention to the salary cap, and at that time I wasn't. And he explained to me that it was either you really trade Pollock or Nick Leddy. And the thing is, those guys were so important at that time, and they were going for a Stanley Cup.
Yeah.
So yes, right now that deal looks atrocious. And yes, it's the GM's job to evaluate, know who his players are, and to not sell them short. But this is a very tough situation, and it's one subject that I have trouble with when it comes to his bashing. But I'm curious to
I
hear your
agree.
guys'
I
thoughts.
No, I do agree with that. Of course, it doesn't look good on paper, especially now, but back then the issues, I mean the way they could have fixed that problem was there wasn't many options. So, I think if you could go back in time, I think you would do that again, honestly.
All right, so here's my problem. I've been waiting for this moment. Okay. Um, I have argued this since the first day that it happened. And my father, if you're watching this, you know we've had this argument 5 million times. Um,
Shout
so
out Mr. Greeny.
shout out Mr. Greeny, shout out Jared. This day when they traded Devon Taves, that was the line of demarcation when I was out on Lou from that moment forward, and
Really?
I'll explain why. So the bubble happens. The schedule is all screwed up because the Stanley Cup happens like early September, if I'm remembering. The
Yeah.
next season wasn't going to start until mid-January. And I believe the Devon Taves trade happened like middle of September, somewhere around there, like right into the off season. And the
Yeah,
whole
that's
thing,
accurate.
yeah, and the whole thing with like, well, they knew that if they went to arbitration with him, he was going to be awarded too high of a salary. They didn't have the cap space. I understand all that. I get it. But in the NHL, as I'm sure we all know, you do not have to be salary cap compliant until opening night of the following season. So the Islanders could have awarded Devontae's whatever he was given in arbitration. They could have signed him to an extension, whatever. And they could have been over the salary cap for the next 3 months until the middle of January of 21 when the next season started. You
Hmm.
had guys under contract like a Leo Komarov or Andy Green at that time, who I think was still under contract. You had ways to move salary. And as we've seen since then in the NHL with the salary dump trades that have happened, even the trades the Islanders have done, which we'll get into, I think there were more avenues to explore to move salary before you move a young puck moving defenseman like Devon Taves.
Yeah, it's true.
Now, the thing that, again, shout out Jared, who's hopefully watching this, would always argue is, well, no one knew that Devon Taves was going to turn into this type of player. True. That is true.
He did show flashes, though.
Absolutely. He showed flashes. Now, to play devil's advocate to myself for a second, who knows if Devon Taves plays his entire career still with the Islanders if he becomes the player he does when he's not playing with Kel McCarr.
Yeah.
Like we don't know that. But I think we can all agree that he showed flashes of being like a legitimate like cornerstone defenseman, at least in the top four, someone that we value.
Top, for sure, a top four. Yeah.
And so, like my whole logic and why I was out on Lou from this moment is like that's the type of player that the Islanders and any team shouldn't be getting rid of under any circumstance. And like if this happened in January and like the season started 2 days later and they actually had to get rid of him or else they wouldn't be cap compliant, that's fine. But the fact that they just decided to move him immediately and they only
Yeah.
got 2 second round picks, like that's kind of where I was lost. And then the last thing, and I know I've been rambling, but they had no contingency plan to replace him. So like, the after the following season, they're moving Nick Leddy. Like they're getting rid of all their puck moving defensemen, and they're relying on an old Andy Green, and they're bringing in Zdeno Chara, and they're doing
Well,
all that stuff.
I guess they knew Dobson was coming up because he was playing on the team in 21, right?
Correct,
Yeah.
correct. And it's just like to summarize my complaint, it's just like that's the type of player you don't get rid of. And unless their hand was forced, which it wouldn't have been because it was September and you had the whole offseason, I don't see the urgency in getting rid of him for what they did. So
Yeah,
that was just kind of the end.
I agree with everything you just said. I mean, yeah, but I do think, like what Jack was saying, if they wanted to go on a run that year, you kind of needed the vets and the older guys who knew how to get it done. But I see both sides of the argument for sure.
It's
Jack?
tough. It's tough. Like
Yeah.
it's not a good look. But personally, when I look at that trade, how do you not get a first round draft pick for Devontae's? Like that's where I'm like, come on, man.
But
That's where it gets.
I was just gonna say, I think Lou almost did that to himself because he was so like there was such a sense of urgency to get rid of him that teams kind of held Lou over the barrel because they're like, we know the situation. Whereas if he held on to him, there's almost like a threat of like, well, we can do something else. We don't have to get rid of him.
I mean, how old was he when he got traded? Is he like 23, 24? Because he played college first, right?
I think I'll double check. I think he was like 25.
Yeah, because he was
Let's
in
check.
Quinnipiac for like 4 years, I think.
Yeah, he was. So he's 31 right now. So they traded him in 21 or
2020
in
summer.
2020. So he was 26.
Okay.
Oof.
It is kind of crazy to think of, though. We got 2 seconds for Devontae's for a 26-year-old Devontae's, and then we got a first plus Cal Ritchie for what, a 34-year-old Brock Nelson?
It's
It's
unbelievable.
We're gonna get into that later, but geez.
it's
Yeah, so it was
all about timing, I guess.
Yeah.
definitely a rough start to the 2020-2021 season. So they actually, this was the year they also cut ties with Joshua Hosang. They sent him packing after a lot of attitude problems. They were maybe hoping he would take a step a few years before. And here we go. So they re-signed Matt Martin to a 4-year contract. They re-signed Andy Green to a 1-year deal. This was this season where they also actually re-signed Matt Barzell at the time to a 3-year contract. And the season begins, and once again, they're really good. This was a weird season, so they're back playing at home. There's no crowd or a very limited capacity for some nights. And eventually, trade deadline comes about. And this is where the Islanders finally make a splash. So Lou trades a first round pick in 2021 and a conditional fourth in 2022 for both Kyle Palmieri and Travis Zajac. This was, I think every Islander fan was pretty happy. I remember it being
Hmm.
between Palmieri and Hall, correct?
Yep.
Yeah, yep.
Who'd you guys want?
I think I leaned more towards Hall.
Same.
Same. I think
But
we all,
I wasn't like
I
disappointed. Like
exactly.
yeah.
I wasn't
yeah,
sad or upset.
I think just because he has that MVP on his resume, we were like, come on, we have a chance to get Taylor
He
Hall up
was
in here.
really good back then too.
Oh, yeah, he was. And moving on. So we have Kyle Palmieri, who ends up scoring 2 goals, I think, for the rest of the season after the pickup. And everyone's
Hmm.
like, oh, God, like this guy's not even helping us. And then the playoffs start. He scores 2 goals in game one of the playoffs. He has the overtime winner. Everything's good. Oliver Wallstrom's actually playing well. He was in the playoff lineup to begin until he got injured. And that's where Zajac came in. And I think their line was Palmieri, Pajot, and Zajac. And they were a good shutdown line. Um, so they go through the Penguins in the first round. Thanks to Tristan Jari for a lot of it.
And Ilya Sorokin and
And
Ilya.
Sorokin,
Thank you, Jack.
I wasn't leaving that out. So Ilya Sorokin had to replace Semyon Varlamov. I believe after game 3 of that series, Sorokin comes in. Does he shut out the Penguins in game 4? I think he does.
I think so. He played phenomenal that series.
I just remember the road game. I think it was game 5, the road game.
Game
He had like
5.
40 something saves. That was one of the best games I think I've seen him play in his career.
I couldn't agree more. So game 5 in Pittsburgh, the Penguins are all over the Islanders all night. Somehow it gets to overtime. It's tied 2-2. We go through one overtime of Sorokin standing on his head just for the other goalie to hand the puck right to Josh Bailey, where he went in, he finished it, and then they came home for game 6, and the Penguins got blown out of the building. Like
Yep.
nobody was beating the Islanders in the Coliseum that night.
I
Um,
just looked it up quick. It was 4-1 for the game 4. So
yeah,
not
he
shutout,
was
but he had
good though.
29 saves. He played really good.
He was awesome in that game. And yeah, he was a big spark. And then the Boston series happens where Sorokin gives up, I think, like 4 or 5 goals, maybe 6 in game 1, and they go right back to Varlamov in game 2. Varlamov had great stats, I remember, against the Bruins, so they wanted to throw him in there. Um, game 2, I think, is the game where Cizikas scores in overtime, gets it back to the Coliseum, where they actually lose game 3 on a Brad Marchand OT winner.
Oh.
They come back, they win game 4, and then somehow Tuukka Rask literally could not make a save in game 5. And that was pretty much the same story in
That
game
was when
6.
Cizikas got the OT winner that game, right?
I think that was game
No,
2.
yeah, Cizikas was game 2.
Okay.
They won 5-4 in game 5.
It was 5-2 at
It
one
was
point, I think.
5-2, and then they let in 2 goals.
Hmm.
The only thing I remember from that game is David Pastrnak scored a minute 25 seconds into the game, and the Islanders they were going into that game, and it was a 2-2, and like Pasta scores, the building's going crazy, and it's like, oh, like I thought at that moment like that was kind of the end. I was like, this is
You know
going to be
what's
an
funny?
avalanche.
I think that I'll never forget this because it's tweeted, like it's on Twitter. So the Islanders get killed in game 1, and in game 2, I think they also score early, the Bruins. And this beat writer for the Bruins tweeted like, "Yeah, it's 1-0 Bruins a minute into the game. They're going to make quick work of the Islanders, man."
238. Charlie Coyle scored 238 in game 2.
So it wasn't looking good at some points of that series. Like it wasn't a great feeling going into game 4. Um, but they got it done, and they really showed like who was the better team as that series went on. So by no mistake, they returned to the conference final. They play Tampa. Game 1 starts. They actually shut out the Lightning in game 1. I think it was a shutout
Yep.
because it was 2-0
Oh no,
final.
sorry, 2-1. 2-1. I
Yeah,
think the last one was yeah, it
these
was late.
teams score at the last minute just to screw up the stats. I'm not even kidding. Like That game felt like a shutout, but it wasn't. So game two happens. For whatever reason, game two is a blur to me. I
That
don't
was
remember.
the game where it was tied, and then the Lightning had 7 men on the ice that they did not call.
Yeah,
And that was the angriest I think I've ever seen Barry Trotz
yeah,
screaming at the officials. And I think
yeah.
it was when Andre Palat scored in the second. It was 1-1. Andre Palat scored to make it 2-1 when they had 9 million guys on the ice. And then they lost 4-2. That was the game.
Crazy because this all doesn't feel like that long ago, but then thinking of Palat being like a really good player like that feels like forever ago. So yeah, the Lightning tie the series. They go back to Long Island again. I think the Lightning win game three. Then the Islanders win game four on the Pollock block shot in front of the net. And then they go to Tampa for game five. That was that was insane. I
Eight
think they
nothing, right?
yeah,
Yep.
Yeah.
they lost 8-0. And they were at the same point they were 1 year ago, down 3-2, going to game six. But instead of the bubble, they're at the Coliseum. Anthony Beauvillier sends them to a seventh game, and they just needed one game to go to the Stanley Cup. And a shorthanded goal from Yanni Gord sends them home.
The
And
first shorthanded goal that they gave up the whole year.
yeah, in true Islander fashion. And yeah, they lose the game 1-0. And it was just unbelievable. Like they went out looking at this from a Lou perspective. They go out, they get Palmieri, they get Zajac. They don't get one forward, they get two. Um, and it was a tough pill to swallow because you just felt like they ran into
Yeah.
a powerhouse.
What were you
And
guys feeling going into that offseason? Did you think like we are super close,
Yeah.
or
Yep.
did you think like that was our chance and we missed it?
We were
super close.
super close. And then we're gonna get into the moves, obviously. But I remember thinking after those moves, like, wow, I think this is actually good. I think we have good depth.
Yeah, that off season, like when you go through the signings and what you were thinking in the moment they made them, you were like, wow, like this is it. And I remember going into the next year, that was the first season where, like the beat writers were saying, okay, this is the Islanders' year to win the Stanley Cup. They
Hmm.
were going into their new building. Things were great. Once again, like what grades are you guys giving? Like the Tays deal didn't we didn't feel the effect of that just yet. Like
Wait, so first of all, great question. I think there are two vibe checks here. So what's the vibe check right after they lose to the Lightning? Like locker
Horrible.
clean out day. But I know like it stings because we lost. But
Yeah.
like as far as like looking at the organization, like as a fan and looking forward to the organization, like what are you thinking like that next week going forward?
I'm thinking just run it back and we're going to be fine. Like add anyone that's good. Make sure I actually remember thinking like make sure you re-sign a guy like Cizikas. Like I didn't want him to go. It was just there was a lot going on in terms of keeping guys here that were important. But I was feeling great. Like I thought we were just going to keep on being like a perennial like contender in the Eastern Conference. If you would have told me on July 1st, 2021, that in a year from now, what the team actually ended up looking, I would not have believed you. I just
Yeah.
wouldn't have. I was feeling good.
What when I remember thinking, what like on locker room clean out day, that we were really close. They shouldn't change too much. But I remember like not feeling great when Eberle got picked by Seattle.
Right.
That's
That
when
is
it like
this off season.
I remember thinking they shouldn't have re-signed Palmieri in my opinion.
I'm so glad you brought that up, Tyler, because that was the point of me bringing up the vibe check at that moment versus
Yeah.
like a couple weeks later. So like I'm with you guys. I'm like, let's run it back. We only need maybe a tweak here, a tweak there in the off season. Like we're right there with the Lightning, and then the expansion draft happens and the off season happens. Jack, take it away.
Yeah, so we lose Jordan Eberle, which I actually was really not happy about. But at that time, I also didn't understand the salary cap still. And I was like, I guess this has to happen. But I was not that was a sickening loss for me. I loved watching Eberle and yeah, it was tough. But we lose Eberle and then they go on. They re-sign Cizikas, they re-sign Sorokin, Palmieri, and Anthony Beauvillier. Now, this looking at it now is so different than back then. Anthony Beauvillier just scored the goal to send them to a game 7. He's a 20 goal scorer
He
like
killed it
every
that entire
season.
playoffs. He was
He's
doing so. I forgot how
still is
many
killing.
points he had, but he was
Yeah,
nasty.
it's 2025 and he scored in a playoff game tonight. Like he's playoff Bo. Like
Yeah,
it's different. So he was a young player at the time. Like re-signing him and letting Eberle walk is objectively the right decision from a
100%.
managerial perspective. And it's like it's just crazy how it turned out. So
And there
Eberle leaves. Yeah.
there were two other moves.
Yeah.
So
The
you had
UFAs.
well the UFAs. I'm looking at the trades right now. That was when they traded Nick Leddy. They
Yes.
traded Nick Leddy
For
to
what?
Detroit for Richard Panik and a second round pick. And then that was also the salary dump when they got rid of Andrew Ladd and his contract. So they traded Andrew Ladd a 21 second, a 22 second, and a 23 third to the now defunct Arizona Coyotes for nothing. It literally says
Wait,
here no return, simply a salary dump.
I forgot, but was there a reason why they got rid of Letty that year?
Yeah, he was struggling and they wanted to re-sign other guys. He wasn't
Yeah,
playing great in the
But they
playoffs.
never replaced him though, because
No.
they signed Chara, right?
yep, that was the replacement. They had 1 year
Yeah.
left of Andy Green, and then they brought in Chara.
Yeah, I don't. I remember not feeling great about that.
And this kind of ties into what I said a couple minutes ago. Like when they got rid of Devon Taves, Nick Leddy became their Devon Taves. And then the season goes by and they get rid of Nick Leddy
Yeah,
and they bring in 41-year-old Zdeno Chara
playing with Dobson. Ugh.
playing with Dobson. And now all of a sudden I'm sitting there. And if we're doing another vibe check, I'm like, I don't really know where this is going.
Yeah, that was a
Like,
rough pair to watch all season, huh?
Once I probably should have realized that things looking back at it were going to definitely change when they lost Letty and Eberle. Those were two pretty important players for them.
Yeah,
Even though Letty was struggling, like his presence wasn't it didn't reach the point where when he's on the ice you were genuinely nervous. Like
no.
he was never at that level. And I'll never forget thinking that he was the worst defenseman at one point. Looking at that now on the roster, I really not on the roster, but in the lineup, I thought he was definitely the one. If you were going to be nervous about one, it was him. Looking at that now, God, I should have been more grateful for that.
Yeah.
well, I mean, he looked awful. And
He did.
they also in that offseason, I just missed this one. That was also when Johnny Boychuk retired. Because if
Yes.
you
Yeah. Yeah.
remember, Boychuk got hurt. I think it was
Mhm.
like in the bubble, and then we weren't sure if he was going to come back. And
What
they
was that
actually,
eye injury?
it was the eye injury. He got clipped by a skate,
Yeah.
and then they actually ended up trading him to Buffalo, technically, even though he was never going to
Yeah,
play
it was
again.
just his rights. Yeah,
Yeah. So it's like you look at all the defensemen that left, like Letty and Boychuk, who like they kind of brought in like the new age of Islanders, like at this point 10 years ago, and they got rid of both
Yeah.
of them, and it was like I don't really know where they're going because they didn't really bring in anybody else. We better hope Noah Dobson turns into like a legit player, and then here we are.
Here we are. Yeah. So as we pointed out, they go on and they actually signed Zach Parise, who I thought that was an awesome. I thought that was awesome. His dad
I
played
liked that
here.
move at the time. Yeah,
Every Islander fan loves that move. Like we're still thinking we're a contender. That when they actually got Zdeno Chara, I was excited. Like, look, I wasn't watching much Zdeno Chara the year before,
yeah, me neither.
so I thought that like he still had something in him for sure. And at that point, like you genuinely trusted management also. You weren't thinking like, oh, I have to worry about who they're signing. Like, no, there was reason to believe these were good fits. And that season started, and that was the first taste of that was a sobering season, I would put it as. So they start on the road for like 15 games. They actually keep their head above water for a little bit. When they get home, everybody gets COVID, and they instead of canceling the games, we had Andy Andriov and Otto Koivula, and it
Richard
was
Panik.
just yeah. And I think these guys all dressed for like the first game at UBS, and then the next one against the Rangers, and they ended up falling. And everything was just a complete disaster. I think Paul Mary was hurt, and like it was February or and you're like 20, you're like 18, 15 points out of a playoff spot. And all of a sudden, like, we're like, okay, not only are we not contenders, but we're not even going to make the playoffs. This is the first season in a new building. They have a ton of excitement around this fan base, and it just so many unfortunate events that wouldn't happen in most years. And you could even start with like the Eberle situation with the expansion draft. Like, how often does that happen? How often does COVID happened? So they found themselves on the way outside looking in. And this was the first deadline where I think people started to really question what was going on in the front office. I mean, personally speaking, I wasn't, only because I felt like this season was really like just you couldn't it was just like a burn the tape. Like, you can't take anything out of this. Like, the circumstances were insane, and let's pack it in and let's go on for next year. No reason to sell everyone. Like, this isn't actually a bad team. They were still putting up great numbers defensively. The one positive is Sorokin asserted himself as the team's starter that season. And
Yeah.
other than that, though, there's very few.
I mean, how did you feel, Tyler? Like going through that season, did you feel like Jack did, where it's like, it's just not our year?
A little bit, but I remember being really upset at the deadline because you could have at least got some draft picks.
Yeah.
You could have sold. I don't really.
Mayfield, Varlamov,
That was
That
the
was the
that was
off
the
season,
Varlam
right?
yeah, that was the Varlamov Mayfield thing. Yep.
Yeah,
Chara,
absolutely. Yeah.
Parisi, all of them. All of them.
So I actually think that starts the trend that we kind of still find ourselves in of like we could have gotten assets for some guys when we know we're not going anywhere and we decided to hold on to them.
Wait, wasn't Mayfield the year after?
Yeah, but he was a name at that deadline.
He
He
was a
was. You're
name.
right. Yep.
I think they
Yeah.
gave him I think it was the extension. Let me just double check.
No,
Yeah.
no, it wasn't. It wasn't that offseason where he was extended, but for whatever reason, he was a name.
Yep. So at that offseason, because he was signed, I'm looking here, he was signed in 23. So at that time, we're talking about the 2022 deadline, he had like the last part of 22 plus one more year. And he was still in his 20s, right handed, shot blocking
Hmm.
defenseman, like very, very valuable. And I also think that was the year that the Oilers tried to get Semyon Varlamov and he wouldn't waive his
Yep,
no trade clause. I think that was
Yeah.
that.
Yep.
correct.
Well,
And it
didn't
wasn't
the
like,
Leafs
hey,
have interest in Mayfield?
that was
Yeah.
this season.
Yep.
Yeah,
Oh,
I
That
was
was
it
that
back
yep.
one.
then too?
Okay.
Yep.
Wow. The
Because
Leafs
he was,
really,
I think he was one of the top defensemen that was available at that trade deadline, if I
Hmm.
remember
yeah.
correctly.
It's funny talking about him in this light, even though I like Scott Mayfield, but like back then he was like a real name. Like, anyone would have taken him on their team. So
Yeah.
that deadline passes. So Tyler was pissed. Greeny, what were you thinking?
I was kind of, I was just kind of over the season. I was kind of like you
Yeah.
guys, like kind of just like burn the tape, like whatever. The one thing that um, was weird about that season is if you guys remember, there was a ton of tragedies as well. Like Clark Gillies passed away, Mike Bossy passed away,
Hmm.
Yeah.
Barry Trotz left the team for like a week and a half because I think his mother passed away.
Yeah, there was just a vibe. Just
It was
yeah,
just an
entire
awful
year.
vibe. So I felt like very negative.
Hmm.
I think it was just kind of towards the circumstances,
Yeah.
but I was like, if we're not going to be good, let's sell some of our assets. And they didn't do that.
Exactly. At least one player, and he
Yeah,
didn't.
just one of the guys. I didn't think it would get to as bad as it ended up being,
Yeah.
but
No, I
it
don't
was
think
just kind
anyone
of
did.
it was just a bad year. It was a really bad year.
Yeah.
So I think that's the first season where giving Lou an A is just
No.
BS. So
Yeah, so okay, so actually good moment to pause. So like
Yeah.
that trade deadline, the season's already over at that point.
yeah, it
We
was.
don't trade anybody. It's been a season from hell up to that point. How are we feeling overall about Lou right now?
Still trust him, but I can't give him an A for that season at all because
B minus.
Chara, there's one thing that wasn't anybody's fault except Lou's, and that's that Chara sucked. Like,
Hmm.
he wasn't good. Parisi was good. It just it wasn't good. It wasn't good vision with that team the way it was constructed. I think that season, I think you got to go with a C.
I'm going B minus only because, like we said about the vibe that year, I just felt like I couldn't put it all on Lou, but that was definitely the first season I definitely started to really question Lou Lamoriello.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I would probably go with like a C. And I remember distinctly like saying to myself that it wasn't only that like they weren't good because of the circumstances, but like even towards the end of the year when they were getting guys back, they weren't playing well. And it was weird because it was like a Barry Trotz team that wasn't playing well, which doesn't happen. And
yeah,
that's the first moment where I'm like, I think it's really the roster, especially when
Hmm.
Barry Trotz is playing 41-year-old Zdeno Chara 22 minutes a night and
It's a
he's
great
on
point.
at that point, like the second pair. At that point, I'm like, I know Barry's a great coach. What is the roster that we've given him where it's turned into this?
you know what? This is
Yeah.
perfect. It leads us right into next season. Did you give a grade?
I said like a C
A
at that
C.
point.
Yeah, we're
Yeah.
on the same page. So as you were mentioning Barry Trotz,
I was actually higher on him that season than you, Jack, this
Yeah.
time.
you were. No,
Wouldn't have
you were.
thought that.
Yeah.
I was disappointed. The Chara signing was so bad. Like there were plays there. So that was the first season I actually my dad and I had season tickets. So I was at all the games and watching it up close. Like there were some plays from that season that I will not forget. Like Chara was just brutal. Like it was a bad signing.
They couldn't
And
get
I
out of
would
their
have
own zone. They
yeah,
would get pinned in their own zone for
it
2 minutes at
was
a time, like literally.
Yeah.
no, it was terrible. And going into the next season, it's the middle of the playoffs. Like things are extremely quiet. And once again, I get another notification where I remember where I was, and Barry Trotz was
Yeah.
fired as
I
head
remember
coach
too.
of the
Which
Islanders. And I was shocked. Maybe I shouldn't have been that shocked, but I was stunned and I was furious at
Well,
this
he
moment.
he was the best coach we had in my whole life, like by far. So I remember being really shocked.
Unfortunately for me at the time, I did not have any sort of information from anybody coming from the inside. Like I took it for what it was, and I thought Lou Lamoriello sat there and literally just decided to fire probably the second best coach in Islanders history.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, Lou needs to be fired now. And a week later, he hires Lane Lambert as the head coach, and I was like, okay, I see the vision here. You're handing it off to the young guy, and Lambert was an assistant. He was a sought out head coach. And I was thinking, okay, like, you know what? Like, let's give Lou his respect here. Let's not question him. Like, this is a good move. Teams would want him. Like, it might not be that big of a difference from Barry Trotz. Boy, was I delusional. Um, so that we got it started with a bang. What were you? I need to know what you guys were thinking when we fired Trotz.
Well, I remember, like you guys, exactly where I was. And at that point, I had an all remote job, so I was at home, and I didn't do a single thing of work the entire day. I couldn't get out of bed. It was literally like a relative had died. I swear to God. Um, I had no idea what was going on. I had no idea what the logic was. I don't know. Did Lou that day? Did he give an explanation? Was there like a press release, or did we just find out that he was
I
gone and we
think it
didn't
was
know?
no, I think it was like the most like vanilla report ever from it was just like the website like Isles
Yeah.
News like they we have
I still remember I got an Andrew Gross Twitter notification. And the only thing it's in classic Andrew Gross fashion, it literally just said Trotz out as Isles head coach. That was it. That was it. And I
Classic.
thought I thought that he got hacked. Like and then I saw the official tweet from the Islanders and I was almost broken down in tears. I couldn't believe it.
yeah tough pill to swallow for all of us like that was Barry Trotz's one individual that I think this fan base go to bat for almost everyone in it um
You want to
tough
know
to
what really pissed me off about that? And I think it came like a week later
yeah
when Luke came out and he does the whole thing of I thought the team needed a new voice.
yeah
Hmm.
That charade,
Yep.
I still to this day don't believe a word that came out of that guy's mouth because it didn't make sense at the time. And then when they go and hire Lane Lambert, it made even less sense. And so
That's true.
I told you guys when they traded Devon Taves, that was like the line. When they fired Barry Trotz, then it became like, okay, this guy needs to actually be fired now.
Yeah.
Like it's no
I
longer
Mhm.
I'm just done with him. He has to go immediately.
That week between hires, I was in the same place you were actually. Believe it or not, I really was because I didn't understand what was going on. Now, years later, I think that Barry really had a lot going on, and I understand. I think he was only going to coach one more season.
Yep.
So
Mhm.
if you know he's not going to be here, I understand turning it over. I do. So like now looking at it, I was angry then, but now like I get it. But still, it still sucks.
Wait, so you guys would have this is interesting. You guys would have moved on from him. Like if Barry told you, listen, I'm coaching one more year, I'm done, you still would have moved on from him at that time.
No.
I wouldn't. I wouldn't. But I could understand if I could understand the argument for doing it, but I
Okay.
would not do that. Hell no.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
I'm with
agree.
you. I'm with you.
You leave when you want to, brother. Like,
Exactly.
we
So
need you.
what I was literally telling my friends was that the Islanders should have approached Barry and given him a lifetime extension. Dead serious. Dead serious. And they say, Barry, we will make sure we can renegotiate after each year to make sure you're in the top, top 5 of AAV for coaches. You tell us as long as you want to coach here, you'll be our coach. That's it. I swear to God, that was my logic.
You know what? I'm not even kidding. Like this theory just came into my head and I have to share it. So that season they stunk. And that was the first season where us fans and the media can look at Lou and be like, all right, like we're not all that confident in what's going on up there. And it was
Hmm.
widely known that Trotz wanted a career as an executive, like in management. Do you think this is a crazy theory, but do you think that Lou can see the trajectory of Trotz going from behind the bench and replacing him in the press box one day?
I
And
wouldn't
he
be
was like,
shocked.
let me put an end to this right now.
I'd believe it.
Because one more season, things didn't go so well the next season. Like there could have been that argument.
So, I first of all, I don't think that's a crazy idea. I wouldn't put it past Lou to be like full self-preservation mode and be like, this guy's not coming in the front office because he's going to take my
Yeah.
job. Like, there's just no chance.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
I also don't know if you think if Lou offered Barry like, okay, you can come on as like my assistant or like an advisor once you're done. Do you think Barry would have taken that? I don't know if he would have.
I don't think so because he knows that he wouldn't have had a say in anything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
No, I don't think he would have done that.
Yeah, I agree.
So
Was it
I oh no, go ahead, Tyler.
wasn't he talking with Nashville at that point?
Well,
I
he had always
Is
been closer. He still had a house in Nashville. He'd always been close.
exactly. Yes, because I like right after he got fired, didn't he go straight to Nashville?
Yep. So I guess the small insight that I do have with the Predators is that he had always lived in Nashville and he had always spoken to David Poile. He's David Poile has been one of his closest friends.
Hmm.
And I guess it was my understanding that like if Barry ever wanted to call it quits, there was always going to be a spot for him somewhere in Nashville. Not necessarily he'd become the GM, but like if you wanted to be in hockey and still be involved, but not maybe have like a lot of day-to-day duties, like you can always come back to Nashville. And Barry's
Hmm.
family always lived there. So I think it was just natural at that point.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So they hire Lane Lambert as head coach, and things are from there till the draft. Things are pretty quiet. They actually had their first round draft pick this season because they didn't go all in at the deadline. With that first round draft pick, they ended up trading it for Alexander Romanov during the draft. And right after, they proceeded to re sign Romanov and Dobson, both to 3-year contract extensions. Um, they this was also the offseason they signed Matt Barzell to an 8-year contract extension, which is another thing. We're not going to get into it because it's too much on that subject, but like Barzell signing after Trotz leaves, like that does make me think a little bit, but nah, I think Barzell loved Trotz, so I won't overthink that one. Season starts, and going into this season, I remember thinking we were going to be really good because I really was maybe delusional, but I thought last season was all because of all of the nonsense they had to deal with. There was no Chara this season. There was Romanov this season. I love the Romanov deal. You get a good young defenseman, NHL ready. And I thought we were going to be really good this season, but it begins. And the guy we kept for instead of Eberle, Anthony Beauvillier, he can't find the back of the net. Palmieri was hurt. He really couldn't find the back of the net either. Josh Bailey's now unplayable.
The
Um,
entire team couldn't score.
the entire team can't score. Like it's literally Barzell and Brock Nelson doing everything. And Sorokin, this was Sorokin's best season in the NHL. He's playing out of his mind. Varlamov wasn't even playing so
Mhm.
great. It was just, and it was up and down until we got to January. They somehow were like, on the playoff line. They were in a good spot come the new year. And then January happens where they literally couldn't score a goal. Just a dreadful, dreadful month. And right at the All-Star break, um, I'm on a work trip. I'm in Los Angeles and I check my phone and I have like 10 texts that we just traded Beauvillier for Bo Horvat. And we also traded Ratu and a first round pick in this year's draft in the 2023 draft. So we just traded for Bo Horvat. He was going to be the top UFA that offseason. And I guess like they were still going for it. And as a fan, I loved that. It was unreal. Like so we get Bo Horvat, season goes on, and then of course, since we're the Islanders, another unforeseen terrible circumstance. Matt Barzell gets hurt for the remainder of the season in the middle of February. And so it's Bo Horvat playing with Josh Bailey and Anders Lee, who was struggling at the time. We have Ross Johnston as a regular for a couple weeks in the lineup. It was just a disaster. Simon Holmstrom came on for a little bit. He was an important piece that year. Clutterbuck was out most of the season. He came back. And on the final day, nope, almost left this out. February 28th, 2023. Oh, this is one you cannot leave out. So the Islanders trade a third round draft pick to the Toronto Maple Leafs for our Swedish friend Pierre Engvall. And they needed Engvall because of all the injuries I just was going over.
I mean, he
And
played good.
Engvall
Oh yeah.
comes in, he plays with Nelson, and Palmieri is healthy again. And these guys are unreal. They literally carried the Islanders to the playoffs with Bo
Mhm.
Horvat and Sorokin, and they make it on the last day of the season. Engvall had an unreal finish to that season, and I remember thinking like, I'm nervous about this guy because I don't want to extend him. I did not want to extend Engvall going into that offseason. And it was just because the way he played, I hated. I knew he was playing well, so I didn't hate him, but I didn't like the lack of physicality. Like you could see the effort stuff. They end up getting into the playoffs, and now we're in. We're playing the Carolina Hurricanes. The Islanders are obvious underdogs in this series, but given what we saw the last time they were in it, the feeling was we just had to get in and we could really do it. Like just get everybody together. Barzell comes back for game one. I was feeling really good going into this series. They lose a tough game one, 2-1. Game two, they're down 2-0 to start. They roar back to take a 3-2 lead. And then this to me was like, this was the real turn of this Islanders era right here. They're up 3-2. They give up a game tying goal with 3 minutes left in game two in Carolina. I'm almost positive the fourth line of Cizikas, Martin, and Clutterbuck were on for that shift, and they just couldn't get it done.
Was that
They
when
tied.
Scott Mayfield was cross-checked or slashed in the face and it wasn't
That's
called?
in
Yeah.
overtime. That's in
Okay.
Yep.
overtime. But that going in, like that game stands out so much to me. And the Hurricanes score in overtime and win it after Mayfield gets high sticked. But that was the first time where like this team doesn't have it anymore because their playoff magic was just gone. Like that was what was special about this team. And they were on the other end of it and it sucked.
You
And they
saw the
came
you saw the miles the miles on the
Yeah,
bodies.
you really watch that shift where the Hurricanes tie it late in game two. Who's on the ice, and it just looks bad. It's a sad moment, and they come home. They end up somehow clawing back in that series to make it to a game six where they lose in overtime in game six, and it was a really weird feeling because it was Lane Lambert's first year done. They had just extended Bo Horvat to an 8-year contract. Barzell comes back. You just still don't really know what they are, but
Yeah.
but it wasn't good enough at the end of the day. I think everybody was on board. They're like, all right, Lambert definitely earned another year. He made the playoffs without Barzell. Like they scored more. It was just their structure was a little bit worse. Like it was a really crazy season. I mean, I don't even know where to start here with
Well,
Lou.
the one thing, I guess, because this is a relatively like uneventful offseason, if I'm remembering correctly. I
Oh
guess
no,
this
this is yeah.
I mean, I was so I was so pissed at this point. Like, I don't even remember what had happened in this offseason. But the just the one thing I wanted to say, like, if you remember before Barzell got hurt, like the way they were trying to play
Yeah.
versus once Barzell got hurt and they kind of reverted back to like the Barry Trotz
Yeah.
lock it down defensive style, and then it worked. Like they got on a hot streak, they got into the playoffs. And then as soon as Barzell comes back into the lineup, they're basically like, screw that. Like, we're going to go back to like the freewheeling, trying to create, and it didn't work. And I just kind of felt like they were in the mushy middle at that
Yeah.
point. That was like the first time I felt like we're not terrible, but it's like we're not even nearly good enough to actually compete. So I didn't
Hmm.
really know where we go from here. So my grade for Lou at that point after that season, I'm still at like a C or maybe even like a C minus. Like I like the Horvat trade. The Engvall trade and subsequent extension was kind of done out of necessity.
We'll get to the extension.
Yeah, but like I'm at that point before going into that offseason, I'm like still kind of a C, C minus, not super confident.
So for me, his first year I was an A. Second year I was an A as well, maybe even an A plus.
Yep.
Third year was the other Eastern Conference final run, also an A plus. And then I gave him the B minus for the year before that, the 2022, I mean 21
The COVID
22
season.
season.
Yeah.
And then I'd say this year the vibe for Lou for me still kept like I kept questioning him more and more. I'd give him a C at this point.
I I really liked what he did this season with trading for Engvall at the deadline because I still looked at it like this team had to make the playoffs and we were going to be fine. I didn't think they were a first round exit, delusional, whatever. But I liked what he did this season. I liked how he went out and he got Horvat. Like he really wouldn't stop. He was really going for it. And as a fan, I really appreciated
I
that.
think for me, like, yeah, he was going for it, but at the same time, I knew it wasn't enough. Like, he would have had to make three times that trade for it to be even close to enough. So, I don't know. I just think
You ended up being proven
too,
right.
yeah,
No,
just
but
too
it's
little, too late kind of thing.
exactly that. Like I appreciate the fact that he like didn't give up on the guys and he went
Mhm.
for it, but you kind of knew that even when he was doing it, that it still wasn't going to be enough. And look at the
Did you know
price.
though
Look at the price that we
that's
were paying.
Did you know though that that season is a really weird season too because the last time they were in the playoffs, they were in the Eastern Conference Finals. So like there was a different I think at the time there was just like a different type of belief in them that we all had. And that's
True.
like really when it changed. Like once they really blew games in that series, you were like, all right, now it
But
might
wait,
be done.
but I also think it's important. Like, yes, the last time they were in the playoffs, they went on the run, but we're talking about over 2 calendar years that had passed from that moment.
Yeah, and the
Guys had been
roster was
hurt. Like, you had guys getting older, you had guys getting hurt, you had other teams in the Eastern Conference. Like, the Rangers weren't a factor, for example, when they were in the conference final in 21. And all of a sudden, the Rangers are coming off a conference final appearance. You have Florida that's burst onto the scene. Like, you have other teams that are there, and the Islanders are just kind of coasting along that same line. So I
yeah,
guess that's kind of why I felt like it just wasn't really
You know what?
enough.
I left out
exactly.
one part in that 2023 season. He claimed Hudson Fashing off of waivers. We all know the story there.
And
Have
he was
scored
great.
like
He
he
was
was
good.
fantastic. Like I thought I thought literally all things considered, like give him, I give him a B for that season.
I mean, I can understand that.
Yeah, I could understand that too.
Do you agree with it?
I
No,
don't.
I
Just
don't.
yeah, my vibe that year was just I just kept continuing to question Lou more and more as the years went by.
If Lou decided at that moment to start tearing it down, I would be giving him a round of applause. I'd be like,
Yeah.
that's just really smart, forward
He
thinking, but he
he could
didn't.
have even traded for Horvat and still, you know,
So
Exactly.
were you guys, so did you guys, were you guys on the fire Lou at this time after that season wrapped up, or were you still like, okay, let's see what
no.
he's got going
I
into
was
this
already
off
on that.
season?
I was on that for the
Okay.
last year. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Well,
wasn't personally,
it's
no.
it's time for the 2023 off season, and this is really where I, I would say this is where it became like probably 60% of people before this off season were like not saying fire Lou, and 40 were saying fire Lou. I would say on that was the case on June 30th. And then on July 2nd, I think that flipped from 60 to 40, maybe more than 60. So right before the NHL draft or during the NHL draft, the Islanders traded Josh Bailey and a second rounder in 2026 to the Chicago Blackhawks for future considerations. I was probably the only one that cared about that. Um, so the next day, the Islanders sign Pierre Engvall and Scott Mayfield to, I can't even say it with a straight face, to 7-year contract extensions. And then they turn around, they throw Sorokin an 8-year extension, and they throw Varlamov a 4-year extension. They sign Julian Gauthier to a 2-year contract. And yeah, I mean, wow. That
Explain this to me. Just please, just explain this to me. Why are we? I don't want to waste more energy on this, but like, why the Sorokin extension and then the Varlamov extension? The Scott Mayfield
it's
7-year extension when he's coming off like another injury. I just
so
help me
Wait,
understand it.
wait, when was the Romanov trade?
That was the year before.
that was the year
That was the
before.
year
So
before. Okay.
Yeah.
Romanov's still on that same deal right now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Um, the Pierre Engvall contract and the Scott May, all of them were because of the salary cap still being so low from COVID. And at this point, I understood the salary cap, and I was still annoyed at. I
Finally
took the
got it, huh?
time. I took the time to look into the salary cap at this point, and I could not understand. I did not like I don't like looking at the Pierre Engvall thing as a whole. I don't like the big picture because the big picture includes now a second round draft pick in 2026, a third rounder in 2023, Josh Bailey, and then you turn around and you sign him to a 7-year contract. We gave up so much for Pierre Engvall. If you just packaged a second and a third and Bailey, you would have gotten better than actually leave Bailey out. Just the second and the third, you could have gotten better than Pierre Engvall, dude.
Yeah.
Like that was when I realized I was like, damn, Brock Nelson's pretty damn good. He just made this guy coin. And same goes for Palmieri, apparently. Like
Hmm.
it was it was unbelievable. Mayfield, 30 years old, 3 mil a year. Look, right-handed defenseman in the NHL is an extremely hard thing to find. I get it. 7 years, it's tough. I love Scott Mayfield, so you're not going to find me bashing this one, like, but I get it.
This
It's a tough one.
this
Like, it's
was
just a
the
tough
move.
one.
This was the move when I started to get on the firewall. I mean, fire Lou Lamoriello train.
Wrong guy.
Yeah,
We'll get to that one in a little bit.
I think
This was the moment where it's like take the keys away from the guy.
you know
Don't
what?
stop letting
Yeah,
him drive. Like
Higher
just
100%.
than 60.
enough.
I would say about 75% of the fan base after these moves were made were not happy.
Just so
They were
bad.
And
So
terrible.
obviously bad.
and the other thing with these contracts, the no movement clauses too. So you lock yourself in to these guys.
Hmm.
And I think
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so my.
the common theme of Lou's tenure, in my opinion, is that he'll make a mistake and he'll compound the mistake with something
Hmm.
else, whether it's trading for them, giving them an extension, and then giving them no trade protection. Like he just he can't stop at making one
Imagine,
mistake. He has to
imagine,
triple it.
imagine what Pierre Engvall was thinking when he signed that contract.
Dude,
Oh my
he was
God.
probably
Probably like this
electrified.
fucking. He was going crazy that night. Holy shit.
He's still
Yeah,
been going crazy. That's why he hasn't played hockey in 2 years.
Yeah.
except for in the spring. We'll get
That's
to
true.
that. In the spring, he locks in. But
Wait, so
yeah,
that offseason, how
that's where it
are the
changed.
three of us going into the 23-24 season? Now, how are we feeling?
You go, Jack.
I think we're going to make the playoffs again. So I'm like, okay, I can live with it. But I just, I just pictured Scott Mayfield at 37 years old and was like, oh, I pictured Engvall on the team and was like, oh, I don't know about this, man. Like, this is a big commitment to Pierre Engvall. And like, I wasn't sold on Lane Lambert. It wasn't a great feeling, but it was a hopeful one.
Okay.
I
You know
I
what?
I figured I thought we were just gonna be in the mushy middle again, and that's exactly what it turned out to be.
I guess I thought the same thing, but yeah,
No, but
that
I think you
season,
were on the like your belief was like, well, if we can just get into the playoffs, maybe the magic is still in there.
Yeah, I never thought
yeah,
like that.
that is
I'm with you,
that
Tyler.
was
To me, it was just so
honestly.
obvious. Even if they got in the playoffs, they weren't winning.
You know
Because
what
my
we also
whole
brushed over.
I'm
Um,
sorry, Jack.
no, you know what? We'll get into it for the next season.
I was
Mhm.
just gonna say last thing before we go to the next season is like my whole logic when it comes to the Islanders in general, and I guess in any of my teams in sports, if you're not going to be good enough to win the whole thing, I don't care if you're going to make the playoffs. Like I don't want my team to make the playoffs, lose in the first round. I'm not going to like be so happy. Like I want them to have a legit chance to actually do damage and
Well,
win something.
I think there's a little bit. So, like, if you're a young team and you're on the come up and you're maybe in
Of
that mushy
course,
middle, then it's like, okay, well, cool. These guys are learning in a couple years. We'll get over that. But when you're a
Yeah,
veteran team and you're just like a downhill, just downhill, and then for the next couple years you're in the mushy middle, like it's like, all right, like you're postponing the inevitable. Like, let's get this going. We're gonna have to rebuild. We're gonna have to retool. Let's start this process already.
it was like that first year. We were all happy with them. Like even though they got swept by Carolina that first year, like we were just happy they were a good team. They were in the
yeah,
playoffs, and it
we
Yeah.
was like,
were
wow, like this is great. But then
different
your
feeling.
expectations change, of course.
Mhm.
And this in 2022-23, they also actually were getting good production out of Oliver Wahlstrom and Simon Holmstrom. So going into the 2023-24 season, you had these two youngsters like on the come up. You had Engvall back. The lineup, if you compare opening night 2022-23 to 23-24, you'll see that the team looks better the next season. And 2023-24 starts, there's injuries. Mike Riley is claimed off of waivers. Um, Robert Bortuzzo at one point is claimed off of waivers. Julian Gauthier strikes out of chances at some point.
Mike
And
Riley,
Mike Riley was a good
Mhm.
pickup.
yeah,
Lou, if there's one thing that isn't really an argument, Lou definitely cooked on waivers during his tenure here.
he went to the Garth
Um,
Snow School of Waiver Pickups. It's good.
yeah, he did. He definitely did. I don't know if he ever had one like Grabner though. That one is
True.
unbelievable. That is the best waiver claim I've ever seen from an Islander.
Actually, and this is a complete sidetrack, but Thomas Hickey,
Yeah, him too. Yeah, okay. He did go to the Garth Snow school.
yeah,
Um, so going in, they are once again, it's literally the same thing as 2022-23. They have a okay start, and then we get to January and they can't score. They can't defend, actually. They're blowing leads. They're a mess as a team. And it became clear at some point in the fall of that season that Lane Lambert's not going to be the guy. Like
Mhm.
he just doesn't have it to be an NHL head coach at the moment. Now, I think if you gave Lane Lambert a good group of defensemen, a really good group of defensemen,
don't
he
do it,
might be able
Jack.
to work with that. No,
Don't do it,
trust
Jack.
me. I'm not a Lane Lambert guy. Trust me. right now for this team, he was clearly not the guy. And that was on January 20th, 2024. Lambert's fired as Islanders head coach. And out of literal nowhere, Patrick Waugh is hired as head coach of the Islanders. And once again, like we're just last year it was Horvat. This year it's the coach. And yeah, it just feels like we're throwing shit at the wall here and seeing what sticks. So Waugh takes over, and the rest of the season goes. They end up, I think, being 10 games over 500. Deadline quiet. They stood pat at that trade deadline. They were just hoping to get healthier at times. They end up sneaking in. They went on like a crazy 7-game winning streak at the end of the season. Varlamov actually carried them to the playoffs. Sorokin had a down year. So the signing of Varlamov looked good, but Engvall found himself healthy scratched. Scott Mayfield, the other 7-year man, was playing on a broken foot and was a complete disaster. Thankfully, he made up for it this year a little bit, but he was so bad that everybody, like, it was just, it was a disaster. Like, this team making the playoffs was kind of a miracle. And they got in and they got destroyed this time. Like, it was like there were times
Was
where
there
they
any
were
doubt?
close.
Was there any doubt?
Yeah, exactly.
Like they were
And
up 3-0 in game 2 in Carolina, and then they lost that game. Like that was just embarrassing, man.
I'm gonna be honest, when it comes to Lane Lambert, I was not the biggest fan of him, but I think he got a little too much blame, a little too much heat. The team just wasn't good enough. It didn't matter who was coaching. The team was not good enough.
I say this about Lane all the time. He was set up to fail.
Yeah.
He had to accept the job, obviously. He
Hmm.
was set up to fail from the very beginning. A, because he was always going to be compared to Barry Trotz, which is just not fair. And B, the second that Lou said, "Oh, we're going to play a little bit more up tempo, a little bit more offensive without changing a single player on the roster until they got Bo Horvat." You can't just change the coach and make players skate faster and develop puck skills and shooting skills.
Exactly.
Just didn't make sense. But also, I'm not going to defend Lane Lambert because the guy couldn't coach himself out of a paper bag. I mean, like the guy was awful.
That guy was a joke as a head
I
coach. Like,
remember that
oh
like famous picture of him with his socks all the way, or his
yeah,
Oh my
pants all the
god!
way up and his socks.
yeah.
When
Oh
they,
man,
his second to last game, I was in Nashville for this game. Do you guys remember this when they were
yeah.
up with like 2 minutes left? They
Matt
give up the
Martin
tying
blew it.
goal, and then I think with like 6 seconds left, it hit
Hmm.
like a broken stick. It deflects, goes over a million bodies, and lands over Sorokin in the net. I was like, this is the season from hell all over again.
I remember Martin had the easiest clear, and
Yep.
he just botched it.
And
Just
that was,
right to the tape of the other team.
and I think it was multiple times where, like, protecting a lead, they had the fourth line out. And people were
Yeah,
like, why
Hmm.
is Matt Martin and Cal Clutterbuck on the ice in this
Yep.
situation? And he kept doing it. It just didn't make
he
any sense.
he was a disaster at deploying his players
Oh,
Yeah,
in the
no,
right
that's true.
spots. Like,
and the
Hmm.
oh
last thing, the penalty kill fell apart, which was the thing that he ran, him and Barry,
yeah,
at least. Like, the penalty kill, they couldn't kill a penalty. I don't know
you know,
what happened.
he that man loved Cal Clutterbuck, dude. Clutterbuck played so much in the beginning of that season. It was crazy. He did look pretty good for his age and everything. All things considered, it was actually a great season for him. He played 82 games. He scored a decent amount of goals. Like he was good, but Lambert just threw him out there way too much.
Yeah,
And
And he also played
this
Sorokin every single night.
yeah.
every game. And Waugh came in. So it's funny because when Waugh came in and they finished strong, that was encouraging to me. And getting back to Lou now, like Varlamov played well. That was a questionable deal. Engvall was one of their better players come playoff time again. And Mike Riley was claimed off of waivers. Like that was a good move. Bortuzzo had to be claimed by necessity. So Sebastian Aho couldn't touch the ice. Like it was just, there was a lot going on, but I really liked the hire of Patrick Waugh at the time. And I thought it was another good, I thought it was good enough to keep your job. And I still was like, you look at it, he made the playoff. The Islanders made the playoffs every year of his tenure up to this point, except for that one COVID season. Like I wasn't, I just wasn't ready to start. Like I still wasn't saying fire Lou. Like I don't know about you guys. My grade for this season, though, I
I
thought
was
Waugh was
saying.
a good move. I thought Riley was. I didn't think the terrible impacts of Mayfield and Engvall were going to start till later years. Like I give this season probably a B minus.
I'll give it a D because once again, it's another year where he's not doing the inevitable. He's not starting to tear it down.
I'll F plus. I don't know. I had already moved on. I'll give him an F plus.
Yeah, that I was just so over it.
Yeah, and like that. Uh, it was when we lost that series in Carolina. I did wonder like if we were gonna like we obviously haven't made the playoffs since because it was just like 2 years ago now last year. I was thinking like this could be the last time they make the playoffs for a very long time. Like that is possible just because of what the team looks like, not thinking about extensions, just based off what they looked like and knowing that they were pretty healthy for that. Like that was rough. Like questioning Sorokin, all of this.
I wanted to hear after that season, I wanted to hear from ownership that we were starting to think about what's next
Hmm.
at that point. Like that's and not even saying like fire Lou. I wanted to hear that there was a plan for the next couple of years of how we're going to be operating past Lou.
I
And
think that's when
instead,
we figured out there wasn't.
exactly. Instead, we just got the double, triple down on Lou.
Mm.
Well, this so we're gonna move on now to last year's offseason. We come out, we signed Marcus Hogberg to a 2-year contract, and I think we did this because we knew that Sorokin. I think they knew that Sorokin needed back surgery,
Yeah, thanks for telling us, Lou. Appreciate it.
which was reported months later.
By the People's Insider,
Yeah, thank you to Ethan and
Hmm.
PSG for that one.
Moses.
So right after that, they signed Maxim Siplikov to a 1-year entry level contract.
Which I
Then they
liked. I like that.
Same.
and then one of the this might turn into being a top like 5 move in Lou Lamoriello's Islanders tenure that's so underrated.
Oh boy.
The Islanders did a pick swap with Chicago in the 2024 draft.
Yeah.
With that pick, they end up selecting Cole Iserman, who's one of the best prospects in their farm system. And when they made that trade, I thought they were just gearing up to make a big splash for a guy like Ehlers or
Iserman was supposed to go 2, and
Yeah.
he dropped all the way to 20. But yeah, sorry to cut you off, Jack.
yeah, no, you're
Exactly.
good.
I did think we were gonna go for an Ehlers as well. I did think that.
For the little minority of guys that love Lou and always support him, getting to call that one a masterclass is hilarious because it was just like the luck that went into that was insane. But hey, luck is you put yourself in good positions, you'll get good luck. So after that, they actually kept Oliver Wahlstrom, who had an awful 2023-24 season. We were hoping for some more development. We also re-signed Simon Holmstrom to a 1-year deal. Holmstrom was very up and down in 2023-24. Like you were expecting more, and it came playoff time, and he played. I think he dressed and he didn't dress, and Kyle McLean dressed. Like that's where we were at with Holmstrom, even
Yeah.
though McLean did have a good year. Um, uh, the Islanders signed Anthony Duclair to a 4-year contract extension.
Which I liked at
They,
the time.
Yeah,
which
I
I
didn't
liked
mind
it
that either.
too. We all liked it. It made sense. He's fast. Play with Barzell. And
And
then
he
they
was a
claim,
he was a Wah type of player too.
Yep.
yeah. So then they claim Liam Foudy from Columbus off of waivers. So now you have like two fringe NHLers in Foudy and Gautier. You go into next season with this Siplikov prospect who coming over from Russia. Like there was some optimism around him, rightfully so. So they start the season and largely the same group. You got Pellick, Polak, Mayfield, and it's like they go in and they're just blowing leads in the beginning of the season, left and right. And there were a few points where, although this similar things had happened in the previous 2 years where they snuck into the playoffs on like the last day of the season, But there were a couple standouts. There were home games against the Seattle Kraken and Buffalo Sabres where they got blown off the ice in their own building. There were just times where it was really ugly in the beginning of the season. And that was the first time where personally I was like, okay, I don't think this team has like that like end of the season run in them. Like I think this is real. I think they actually might be bad and they're gonna have to start like making some moves here, or else we're gonna be screwed. And I was looking at the roster, looking at the assets we have. Like we had all our first round picks for the future. Somehow, we had we have so many expiring contracts. Like there's actually room to fix this thing. And it became January 1st. We're out of a playoff spot. You know what? I'll skip 2 weeks later. It's January like 16th. We're like 4 games under 500, and the season's going just terribly. There are a couple injuries happen, and all of a sudden, this literally happened overnight. Adam Boquist, Scott Perunovich, and Tony DeAngelo are on our team, like, out of nowhere, and this season feels over already. Like the question really is, are we just going to get to the deadline and sell everybody? Are we like, what are we even doing here? Are we just going to tank for Hagens? Like this was the talk in January, and the
Yeah.
actual on ice product was nothing to talk about until Mikko Rantanen makes his debut against the Islanders as a Carolina Hurricane. Brock Nelson scores an overtime winning goal. Then D'Angelo caps off a 7-game winning streak in Tampa Bay with the overtime winner. The Islanders now won 7 straight games going into the first week of February with Scott Perunovich, Tony DeAngelo, and Adam Boquist as regulars in their lineup. Noah Dobson and Ryan Pollock were injured during this, and these guys are
Hmm.
just flying the puck around all over the ice. Like it was that run was that 7 game winning streak was something. Um, and
Yeah,
then you
that
start to
brought me
question.
back into it because I was honestly like kind of checked out. Like I was just tired of being worse than mid at this point.
Yeah.
But
I think what we all liked about that time period was it was really that was the first time it felt different in actually like 8 years. It
hmm,
felt
I
different.
I was just gonna say that, Jack. I
100%.
got more engaged because they were just new people.
Yeah,
Like as
yeah,
dumb as that sounds, there was just
Yeah.
that's exactly what it was.
I was watching people that I hadn't watched in an Islander uniform before. It was that simple.
Hmm.
When D'Angelo came over and like when
Start
D'Angelo,
dancing on them.
yeah, when you got
Yeah,
Tony dancing on him, you got Perunovic, you got Boquist, like these guys, the way they were moving the puck around, it was crazy to see as an Islander fan. Like you go from watching Mayfield, Pellick, and Pollock to that, it's like, wow, that is crazy to watch.
And
Um,
so we'll touch on this like once we wrap up in a few. But like the overall theme, and I can expand on this in a little bit, but like the overall theme of Lou is that his good moves end up being reactionary moves, not thought out moves in advance. Just like all of these players, Lou was never going to sign Tony DeAngelo or Bovequist or Perunovic or any of these guys if their entire defense core didn't get hurt.
yeah. Oh, 100%.
So it's like, yes, do we give Lou credit? Sure, absolutely. He made the moves. But what would he have done if we didn't have any injuries and we were still just losing games, blowing leads, allowing power play goals?
And none of them were trades, right? He just signed. There were one
no, he
Boquist.
claimed
Um,
to.
he claimed Bobequist, and I think it was Perunovic too. He claimed,
No,
No, he
or was that a
traded a
trade?
fifth. He traded a
he's
Yeah.
fifth that he got back actually
exactly.
as
So it technically
conditional.
was he didn't give up anything. No, so I was completely fine with
You
that.
know
So
what's funny?
it was a
He
trade, a
acquired
signing, and a claim.
Yeah, he acquired all three of them in three different ways.
Yeah,
Hmm.
It's kind of crazy.
And didn't
It's
end up
just
paying a
insane.
thing.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah,
like kind of another masterclass there. So
for sure.
now, like the team's on a 7 game winning streak, and it's just like it's insane. Like we literally thought our season was over in the middle of January. Don't listen to anyone else. We were 4 games under 500, losing on home ice to the Flyers. Like it was disgusting. Um, Varlamov also being out for the season definitely didn't help. We go
Yep.
into the deadline and now it's chaos in Islander world. Like they end up like kind of middling off a little bit. Like they got blown out at the Garden. They beat the Winnipeg Jets. They lose to the Stars, and like it's deadline day now, and you have Brock Nelson and Kyle Palmieri's contracts expiring, and I think most of the fan base understood like it's time to move on from Nelson, and it sucks, but it's just the business and where we're at right now. It does not make sense to keep him. So in one of like the in definitely the shock of the trade deadline, Lou trades Brock Nelson for Callum Ritchie, a first round draft pick in 2026 or 27. And that's it now because the Avalanche ended up losing in the first round. And like the next day I was watching, I forget which reporter it was talking about Cal Ritchie, how like executives have been calling the Avs all the time for
It was
this
Frank
guy.
Frank Saravalli, the
It was
legend.
Frank. So yeah,
Yeah.
Frank reported that like all these executives were like, "How the hell did Lou get this done?" And Islander fans were literally happy for 12 hours because then it became apparent that they were keeping Kyle Palmieri and they were going to extend him.
And then
Um,
it also came out that his first option was to re-sign Brock,
yeah,
and Brock pretty much forced him to make the trade.
Rafters.
yeah, seriously, like looking at it now, I'm so happy that Brock did that, and I'm sure
Mhm.
I don't know if Brock is happy he did that. Um,
You could just come back
after
here in the offseason. I'm
like
kidding. I'm kidding.
that's what like maybe Lou was like thinking that, but yeah, so they keep Kyle Palmieri and they end up having a pretty rough end to the season. They ended up also there were some other guys rumored to go that are expiring next year, like JG Pajot, Anders Lee. And they also, at this point, some of the defensemen that we mentioned weren't even playing because the other
Mhm.
defensemen came back healthy. And there were like 9 defensemen on this team. No defenseman moved, which kind of bothered me, actually. I was not happy about that. So
He should have made at
season
least one
ends.
other move,
Yeah.
at least.
Yeah. And not Dennis Chalowski, a real move.
Yeah. In my
Um,
opinion, I think Palmieri and Pajot should have went.
Yep.
so the season ends. They end up drafting 11th. They end up getting the 11th the
Slot.
10th.
Yeah.
The 11th was it the 11th or 10th?
Tenth.
I think it was 10th. Yeah.
They get the
Mhm.
10th slot to pick number 1 overall, and they get the first overall draft pick
Thank you,
after
Kathy
Lou.
Hochul.
Yeah, due to tremendous luck, the Islanders end up with the first overall pick, and that's really that's the last of Lou's tenure as president and as
He went out
general
with a bang.
manager. So if when I look at this last
Wait,
calendar year,
was Lou? Did they announce the Lou thing before the lottery?
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Okay. Okay.
yes. So when you look at the last year of his tenure, he signed Siplikov, he drafted Iserman, he signed Holmstrom, he signed
Hmm.
Duclair, he signed D'Angelo, he claimed Perunovic and claimed Boquist. 2 out of 3 of those are controllable assets.
Hmm.
He acquired a first round draft pick and Callum Ritchie in his last calendar year.
And the
I
first
gotta
overall
be
pick, technically, because his
so
team got him to
yeah.
get the first pick. So
Yep.
So I mean, let's grade it. Let's grade his final season. I'm actually going to give him a. I'm going to give him a B.
I'll give him a B as well. It could have been an A minus if he
It's.
sold Pajot and Palmieri.
I'm. I'm. I'm going to give him a B plus.
Hmm.
I'm going to give him a C. The only reason I'm going to do that is because he was going into this season trying to win, and the team he put together was not even close.
And
So
he
I
didn't
think,
even want to trade
and
Brock. So
and he didn't
yeah,
want to trade, like he
he was
backed
forced to
it.
do it.
Yeah, like I said a couple minutes ago, like he was forced to make half the moves that he made. It ended up working. I think
Reactionary.
the most ironic thing of his whole tenure is that I would probably argue that this final season was his best season as Islander general manager. You can
It's
argue
kind of
You
with the
could argue that.
transactions
You definitely could argue it.
and this is my problem. So let's get into the
overall.
legacy. Yeah,
Yeah.
let's get
Mhm.
into it. Like this is my issue with this is my issue with people that hate this guy. So he comes here. It's a mess. We outlined all of that. They go to the playoffs. They're trying. So 2019, they go to the playoffs. 2020, okay, like we're gonna try to win a cup. goes and gets Andy Green and Pajot. He goes for it. They don't win. 2021, we're going for the cup. Gets Palmieri, gets Zajac. Next season, 2021-22, okay, disaster. That's a disaster. But like he going back and like getting into the should he have sold then? Should he like it's hard. 2022-23, let's win. Goes for it. He goes for it all. And then they lose in the first round, but a playoff appearance. Same thing the next season. They made the play. Like when they were trying to win, he did everything he can in his power to get them over the line, and they just couldn't get it done. And so this season, it was time for the retool to really, it was time to really start looking in another direction. So when he was going for the playoffs, I thought he did a great job of trying to get them over the hump. And now when you go look at the retool, like this is his work during a retool. This is good work. Like this is serious stuff. Like Cal Ritchie, first round pick, first overall pick. Like
But it was kind of like it was kind of like a retool by accident in a
Exactly.
way. Like,
it's insane
Exactly.
work. Like looking at his whole resume, 5 out of 7 years in the playoffs. One of the years he misses it, he ends up with two can't miss prospects in Iserman and Ritchie and draws into the first overall pick. Like I honestly looking at it, it's kind of like shocking to me how like 95 to 100% of this fan base is so done with him. I just don't
I
I just
think
don't get it.
so. This is how I think of it. I think he brought respect back to this franchise, but he overstayed his welcome.
yes.
So he did. Yeah, I'm just gonna leave it at that.
So, and I could not agree with you more. And the other thing, and I think I put this in our group text before, when you're evaluating Lou, when I look at Lou's entire career, there's Lou like the president, and there's Lou the general manager. Lou is a president for culture setting, the rules he put in, his cone of silence, the shaving, the low numbers, the whatever. I am all for it. He turned the Islanders into a respected organization. The Islanders are looked at like a legitimate professional franchise now, not one that's being threatened to move to Kansas City.
Hmm.
Uh, that is incredibly important. And I think everyone, including me, should be and is incredibly grateful for what he did. And the fact he was willing to come here and fix a broken franchise, a franchise that was just fucked up for so long. But when I also look at Lou as a general manager, going back to when he was in Toronto, when he was in New Jersey, he has never been really good at managing a roster, a salary cap. His success occurred pre-salary cap. We've talked about this before. He's given out awful contracts, whether it was an Ilya Kovalchuk, a David Clarkson, or a Scott Mayfield. I mean, like there's a million of them.
Clarkson wasn't him.
Was that he was in Toronto for that? Was he?
No, no, no. He was still in Jersey for that one, actually.
Okay, so
Point
scratch
still
that.
But
stand.
still,
Yeah,
he's
but
giving out bad. He's giving out bad contracts.
he's giving out bad contracts, and like, listen, he's not going to be good at everything. Like, I'm not going to be critical of that, but this is also someone that had a very small front office, didn't really listen to anybody else's opinion. He did things his way. God bless him. He did things his way, but he was not very good at the roster management part. But I think for me, when I look back at Lou's tenure as an Islander GM and president, I probably give him a B plus or an A minus overall because
Yeah,
of what he meant to the franchise, what he did for the franchise.
I'd
But
say so as well.
it was time. I think we can all agree. It was
And
just it's time.
it's not like he left this franchise. Thank God. It's not like he left us like he left the Devils.
Oh my God.
That
Like
was
we
something I
we
wanted
we
to bring
kind of
up.
got lucky because we got the first overall pick, but it's not nearly as bad.
That was my last question for you guys. I mean, looking at how he left this team for the next general manager, like when you compare that to New Jersey, you see somebody that has learned from their mistakes. Like we're
Yeah.
talking about every first round pick. We're talking about an actual prospect pool with talent. Like it's pretty crazy to look at. Like this next general manager really has it all lined up for them. And maybe it's good that he's done now because when we look back at him, I think the tone will be a lot different in 5 years than it is right now.
Yeah, 100%.
Can I just play real quick, devil's advocate, real quick
Yeah.
on that? Do you guys think that he went about this the way that he did? Like we all agree they're in a good spot, salary cap wise, draft picks, everything. Do you think that that was because he anticipated still being here?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
So I like again, God bless him. Thank you for doing that and not screwing us over. But I also think that part of that was like he anticipated still running this thing,
Mhm.
and he was
Absolutely.
just going to kind of try again next year.
And my biggest issue overall with him was that what he did this year, he should have done a year ago or even 2 years ago.
100%.
That was the biggest issue I had with him, but he's gone now. Someone else is going to take over. We're going to see where it goes. But yeah, I think when we look back, it definitely depends what's going to happen in the next couple of years, but I think I'll remember him for the Eastern Conference Finals runs and hopefully setting up the team for what it's going to become.
If you had to give him a final grade, two of you, overall tenure,
Overall,
Probably an A. Not an A plus because we didn't win a Stanley Cup. We'll give him an A though.
I'll say either a B or a B plus.
He is you have
I'll
to
give him a
remember.
grade. I'll give him an 86%.
I got a
You
lot of
have
86s in my life. That was good.
Yeah.
to, yeah. I
I'll go
mean,
with you. I'll give him a B, B plus.
Okay.
one thing we didn't dive into that definitely played a part in his downfall was the management of Bridgeport and his son. Like that was a problem that I'm glad we didn't harp on it too much because it's something
Yeah.
that as like more of a I pay attention to the big club. Like I'm not my eyes aren't down there, but that was a disaster and that has to be mentioned.
Me neither, but I'm in Connecticut now, and I'm going to be going to some Bridgeport games, so I want to see a good team out there next year.
You'll get a better product next year, that's for sure.
I
I
hope
do,
so.
and I do also think that Bridgeport. He would have put more importance on Bridgeport if the actual NHL team was in like on a different timeline. I'll say. I think he was
Yeah,
just going all in from the moment he got here, and so
Yeah.
his mindset was like, I don't really care about Bridgeport.
Yeah.
But
I agree.
hopefully that changes going forward.
Hmm.
Well,
Well,
I think that does it for us, guys.
Yeah.
yeah, I'm good here. If you stuck around for an hour and 47 minutes, we appreciate you. We love you. And I guess we'll talk to you soon. You guys have anything else?
No, that's it. Thanks, guys.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.